All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm your host, John Harris, and with me today is Mr. Todd Doobrow. Did I pronounce that correct?
Yes, sir.
Doobrow, good. And then you're based out of Nashville?
Out of Birmingham.
Out of Birmingham. Okay. And then what kind of geography do you cover? Do you cover Tennessee?
Oh yeah, I'm in. I think I was in 19 states last time I counted.
Nice.
Pretty much California to Washington State, as far north as New York, and all the way down to Florida. So nowhere's off limits.
I got you. And then right before I hit the record button, we were talking a little bit about the metals behind you. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, you can't work all the time. You got to have something to do to be passionate about and have a hobby. So I run a lot of the mud runs all around the country. I've done probably 50 or 60 or so in the last few years. Hoping as soon as this pandemic gets past us, we can get back to earning a few more.
Yeah. Is that like the mud runs? Is that kind of outdoor? I know it's outdoor. It's a race. It's like, what is it, like a 5K?
Yeah. They most of them they vary in distance from 3 miles is the shortest to about 17 or so is the longest. And there's obstacles along the way between 20 to 45 obstacles along the way that they throw in. And it's just a matter of survival. So just something fun to do when get you out of the office and get you outside.
Yeah. So it's like a 5K obstacle course.
Yeah. The short runs. Yeah.
Yep. A lot, big groups of people.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. There were waves of 250 at a time. So
wow. Does it ever get physical? Like people trying to push you off of something or?
No. As a matter of fact, that's one of the things I love most about the community is everyone out there is incredibly supportive of each other, and you're cheering each other on. And if you're ever out there running and someone's on the side of the road and they got a cramp or whatever, someone will come by with a packet of mustard, some Gatorade, pickle juice, whatever it may be. But everyone is incredibly supportive of each other. That's one of the things I love most about them.
Very good. As men and women do this together, right?
Yep.
How many of those have you done?
Yep. All in all, I'm guessing probably 55 to 60 or so.
Over how long a period of
time? 2-3 years.
2-3. Wow, man. So you're doing like every few weekends you're doing one.
I was, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm not much of a golfer. I don't have season tickets to anywhere. So that's what I would do to pass my time. And, when I'm getting into it, my wife, if I'm telling her the worst thing I'm doing is try to stay in shape, she's not usually too mad about it.
When you're not competing, are you like training for that kind of stuff, or you just go to the gym, or what's that like?
Yeah, going to the gym, trying to maintain. You do a lot of workout, a lot of cardio, just because you are running so many miles along the way, and I like to do high interval training to get my heart rate up, and then try to get it back down as quickly as possible to try to simulate when you're out there on the course. Right. You may run a half mile, and then there's a big obstacle. And you can't attack that obstacle, if your heart's pumping and you're just not physically right.
Right. Do you have a coach for that kind of thing, or you just do your own stuff?
I just do my own stuff. I've done enough of them now. I kind of know what to look for.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. There's a guy that my brother's trying to get me hooked up with. I can't remember. Total Archery Challenge, I think is what it's called. Yeah. And this guy sets up because I deer hunt and I like to bow hunt. It's probably my favorite.
Okay.
And he's got, and not because I lift and do all that kind of stuff. And he's got a course. It's like an obstacle course, but it's you're shooting targets with your bow. And it's like there's like kind of like a 5K, and then you go so far. And this guy's like jacked, like really good shape. Like he's in his 50s, but he looks like Sly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like there's things where you'll be like, on a canoe floating across the lake and you're shooting targets on the other side of the lake. I mean, it's pretty neat. I've kind of looked at some of it. You ought to go on YouTube and check it out, man. It's pretty wild. I've never done it, but it would be, I just don't know if I would want to like target shoot and work out at the same time.
Sure. Why not? Try anything once. You never know. You may actually like it.
You may. Very true. Very true. So tell us a little bit about, so you're based out of Birmingham.
Yep.
How did you get in? You're a wealth advisor now.
Yep.
How did you get into that? What was your background, and then how did you get into doing what you do now?
Yeah, so I always wanted to be in this business. I graduated college in the mid 1990s, so the grays are starting to come in a little bit. Mm-hmm. And before I knew it, I was actually in Atlanta and working with a group. We were managing, well into the 9 figures worth of client assets. Lots of millionaires, lots of very high profile people. And around that time, I had gone out one weekend to celebrate a particularly good week in the office and bumped into this little brunette at a bar. Next thing I know, I'm in a serious relationship, and my wife had started dental school. So we got married the second year of her dental school, excuse me. And right around the time she finished, she was applying for residencies. And unfortunately her father passed away, and he was a periodontist as well. He had his hands in a couple different businesses, and we had to move back to Birmingham to help clean up some of the stuff that he had left behind. I actually had to get out of financial planning for a while because I had to take over some of his businesses, get them cleaned up, get them sold off. So when I was able to get back into the business and going through all my licensure exams again, passing all those tests again, I was trying to figure out what I really wanted to do because there aren't too many multi-million-dollar athletes floating around Birmingham. And I realized that there were a lot of doctors and a lot of dentists who not only knew my father-in-law, but knew his situation. Excuse me?
I said, go to Tuscaloosa.
Yeah.
There's plenty of high profile athletes coming out of Alabama.
There are a couple coming out of that factory for sure. But no, so I really focused on the dental market. At that time, I was helping my wife get her practice. She inherited the practice from her father. I forgot to mention that. So when he passed away, she was a resident. Luckily, the resident director was nice enough to let her see patients in residency from 8 a.m. until about 11:30 or noon. And then she'd jump in her car and drive to the practice and see patients in the practice for 4 or 5 hours a day. Mm-hmm. So, we're trying to put the pieces all back together. I'm trying to run my business. She's trying to run hers. Like most dental students, they don't really get a whole lot of business experience in school and in undergrad. That just wasn't her area of focus. So she really didn't even know what she was looking at. So I'm trying to run my business. I'm trying to grow my practice, and I'm literally in the business with her, looking over her P&Ls, looking over her numbers. And really just over the past decade plus, that's been my focus, is getting in there, working with dentists more on an educational basis than anything, just trying to help them understand what it is they're doing, what their dollars are doing as they flow through their practice. And then figuring out what I like to call dollars per gallon, right? I believe if you're working your butt off to make $1, let's get the most out of that dollar that we possibly can. And so just improving some of those operational efficiencies, improving some investment efficiencies, anything that we can do to help your dollar work harder is ultimately going to help you get to that end game sooner, regardless of what that end game looks like.
Can you give me some examples of the operational efficiencies and the investment efficiencies?
Sure. One of the easiest ones that we look at is labor and supplies, right? Those are the two numbers that I want all of my clients to know off the back of their hand, at least what their targets are, right? A dental office in Birmingham is going to have different labor numbers than a dental office in New York City, but they should know their target percentages, right? And depending on what kind of dentist you are, or if you're a specialist, a couple other things, we may peg your labor number at 25%. And so if we decide that's what your number should be, when we go in, we're working with guys like Fortune, I want to know, are you at 21% or are you at 32%? And either one of those numbers presents a problem if 25 is right. And so, I'll go into some of them and the target's 25, they're at 21 and they're going, Todd, this is awesome. I'm saving 4% on labor. And they don't understand, well, you're really not, because that means you're making everybody else work, 25% harder to make up that difference. So, it's things like that we want to make sure that they're crystal clear. On the investment standpoint, in the last 6 months or so, we've reviewed more company retirement plans that haven't been looked at in probably 5+ years. Just because most doctors, they're busy, they got things to do. It's not a high priority item. I had a meeting this morning with a doctor. We're saving her almost $8,000 a year just by literally filling out a form and making one change to her plan. It's not going to impact her auxiliary, her staff, her plan. Website access is still the same. Investment options are still the same. We're literally making one change to her plan, and that's enough for her to pay, all her Christmas bonuses. So, she's very happy right now.
Very good. So is your approach more like asset protection, growth, and then acceleration, or what's that kind of look like? What's basically the model that you take your people through?
Right. So I use a 6-step process, right? And I've used it ever since I got out of school. And, it took some tweaking over the years, but what we do is work people through what we call their next marginal dollar. So we understand whether it's your business or whether it's your personal assets and income, you have to pay your mortgage, you have to pay your power bill, you have to pay your water bill, right? It's what do we do with those next dollars? And just to kind of go through it real quick, the first thing that we talk about is giving. Our practice believes that you should give up front, not at the end. But we're never going to ask how much to who. I don't want my clients asking me, is it 10% gross or 10% net? I was just brought up in a house that believe we give back as much as we can. So the first thing we talk about is giving. The second thing we talk about is protecting our income and our assets. So usually it's reviewing on a personal level, disability insurance, life insurance. From a practice standpoint, we want to look at business continuity. And if you were lucky enough to get something from all this pandemic craziness, look at your business overhead policies as well. The third thing that we talk about is establishing some kind of emergency money fund. The fourth thing that we talk about is planning for debt. So let's review your practice loans. Let's review your student loans. Let's review any sort of debt that you've taken out and make sure that we just have a smart plan for paying it back. We don't have to get it down to zero, but let's just make sure we're taking advantage of today's low interest rates. Mm-hmm. The fifth step that we talk about is what I call 10+ year money. So for most people, that's retirement. It's college planning for the kids. On a personal level, on a practice level, if they want to expand, if they want to bring in a new associate, if they want to buy multiple practices, that's usually where that conversations come in. And then the sixth step that we talk about is 1 to 10 year, what I call the fun money, right? Again, on a personal level, that's the new house, the new car, the vacation place, the boat, hunting for targets in a canoe across a lake. From the practice side, again, it could be bringing in a new associate. It could be build outs. It could be finally buying the CBCT. So we've got a documented plan that we like to work through with everyone so that when we bring clients on, they know exactly where they are in the process the whole time. And one thing that we never, ever want to feel like is that we're pushing products on someone. Right. We're very big on the education part. We're very big on getting people to understand the why behind we need dollars to do this and we need dollars to do that. So what we found is that when we use this 6-step process with everyone, yes, some of the insurances, which a lot of people just turn their nose up to and they're tired of talking about it and they feel like they're overinsured. It is at the beginning because those are the important things that we need to take care of. But they also understand that as we work our way through the plan, we're going to talk about the more sizzling stuff that people ultimately want to talk about.
Very good. And then, so is that basically they start when you're talking about, I have income.
Yep. And
then I basically start at step 1 and I fund that first bucket. And then once I've funded the first bucket, then I go to the second and the third, fourth, fifth.
So great question. The way we do it, we have a very interactive financial planning website that every one of our clients gets. They get their own personal login. We upload basically everything that they own, and then we can really start dissecting all 6 of those steps. So if you're making X amount of dollars and you tell me, hey, Todd, I've got disability insurance, I don't need it. We're going to do a quick review. Right. Just to put some numbers to it, because this is a case that we had about a month ago. I had a sleep specialist who's making about $250,000. She told me that she had disability insurance. She did. And it had a $3,000 monthly benefit to it. So in my mind, if you're used to living on a $250,000 salary, heaven forbid something happened to you, you're not going to be able to survive off $36,000 a year. So did she have a policy? Yes. Was it enough? No.
Right.
So let's review that. Let's take a look at it. So it doesn't necessarily have to be fill up bucket 1 before you move to bucket 2, fill up bucket 2 before you move to bucket 3, because most people, by the time we meet them, they're already doing a little bit of everything. So that's just the order that we found is most relevant to people where they are in their position. But if I also tried to dump all of these things on a doctor at one point in time, I'm probably not going to hear back from them for 3 or 4 months. So if we break it off into little bite-sized pieces, it's easier to digest and it's easier to get that feeling of accomplishment when we can say, okay, we've gotten through 1, 2, and 3 already, and we're only 2 weeks into working together.
Right. I'm going to pick your brain for just a second. Because I get the disability and all that kind of stuff, having protection. And what actually, let me back up. What's your recommendation on what my not nest egg, but what my protection bucket should be? So on, let's say on the insurance side, how many times my annual income would you recommend I have term or whole life?
Right. The irony is the younger you are, obviously, the more times your income you need, because you need that money to last longer. Right. Theoretically, the longer that you've been working, the more you've got saved up. So you don't quite need as much insurance. So it completely depends on where you fall. The great debate between term and whole, we could have a whole nother podcast just on that. Yeah. There are some tax advantages to whole life. There are a lot of people who say, as soon as I say that, probably clicked end and, screw this guy. I don't want to hear from him. If you understand how it works and you decide that's what you like, great. If you learn how it works and you don't like it, that's fine too. The beauty of how we work is we're independent fiduciaries. So I don't work for an insurance company. We have contracts with them where we can sell their products. But my paycheck and how we get paid isn't based on, pushing so many insurance policies a year. So, again, it all goes back to education and understanding the why and the how. And if you like the why and the how, that's great. If you don't like the why and the how, go to term.
Yeah. See, I started out with a lot of term, and I think it was recommended that I have like 8 or 9 times my annual income in term insurance. And so I got that. And then I converted some of that to whole life. And then obviously my premium went way up. Whole life's a lot more expensive than term. And so this was income conversation, right? Because as my career's progressed, my income has progressed. And early on, I couldn't necessarily afford the whole life premium. And now I can, and I'm able to overfund that. Yep. I really like the idea of building an asset on my balance sheet. Yeah. I'm the mindset where I don't necessarily, like, I make plenty of money coming, doing what I do on a day-to-day basis. But I want additional assets that are paying for themselves and creating equity on my balance sheet. For example, I'm building a gym in my hometown. I don't need money. Right. I don't need money from it. I would like to have a good place to go work out. And I've been in the gym for 25 years plus. So it's kind of, it's an interest of mine. And I don't necessarily, because I struggled when I was developing the business plan, because the SBA is the only thing that's going to fund that project. Yeah. And so it's a nightmare, man, because they're wanting me to show profit and how much are you going to be making off this gym? And I'm like, I don't need any, I don't plan to take any money off of it. I want to, if there's profit, I'll turn it around and take that profit and I'll pay the asset off faster. I want it to generate enough cash flow to pay the note at the bank and cover all of its expenses. Right. So that I've got this asset on my balance sheet that's basically paying for itself. And that's a concept that I discuss with a lot of first-time owner doctors who are associates. Mm-hmm. Right. And one of the big questions they come to me with is, can I buy a practice and still take home the same amount of money that I'm taking home now as an associate? Right. And it depends. Yeah. If you buy the right practice, absolutely. Right. If you buy the wrong one, maybe not, so there's some variables there. And then that takes us into a whole nother, conversation about these guys being too picky about where they want to practice, and they want to be in the metro city, where there's 1,700 dentists rather than just the suburb 30 minutes west, where they're going to make more money, and all that kind of stuff. Okay. So, and one of the things I do like about whole life, we use this with a lot of our clients. Let's say, for example, we are bringing in an associate, and let's say the associate is phenomenal. And after working with them for 12 months, we're like, yep, absolutely. We're going to keep this guy around. This is future partner material. Yep. We want to lock that guy in. And so one way to do that is to basically create an arrangement with them whereby we set aside a percentage of what they generate into this account over here. And so let's say, for example, 2%, we're going to take 2% of everything that's collected on what you produce. We're going to put it over here in this account. The account doesn't actually exist, right? It's a shadow account, right? It's imaginary, it's fairy dust. But what we're going to do is in 5 years, we're going to give you the option to buy in. And however much money is in that account, you're going to trade that in and we're going to give you stock equity in the practice.
Right.
But, this isn't my area of expertise because I'm not an accountant, I'm not a financial advisor. And so from what I understand, and this is where my accounting friends or the accountant, whoever's working with this client, this is where they come in. And when we create that liability over here on the balance sheet that says, I'm going to owe Todd $150,000 in 5 years. Okay. I've got a liability over here because I'm saying that I've got to pay that in 5 years. Well, I've got to create an asset to offset that. Right. So a whole life policy is a really good way for me to just overfund this whole life policy and build cash value to offset the liability for the associate. And then when that associate trades that account in for equity in the practice, if they leave before 5 years, they get nothing. But if they're here 5 years from now, he can trade that in, he get equity in the practice, and this cash value is still here.
Yeah. The other common way to do that is to use what's called a Section 162 bonus plan, where in effect, the older dentist cuts a check to the young dentist and kind of a back of the napkin agreement that the young dentist agrees to put that amount into an overfunded whole life policy. And when it comes time, when that 5 years is due, there are different kind of policies that you can use to do it, but they're different. One of the policies you can use is called a high early cash value. So it gives you access to about 90% of the cash that you dump in, right? So you put in 50, they have access to about 40. You do that 5 years in a row and, all of a sudden you want your money, no problem. It's been safe. It's been secured, contractually obligated to grow at a certain percent every year, so you don't have to worry about what the stock market's doing. And that's a popular way to do that we found as well to help younger associates buy in, but also to create that, we call them silver handcuffs, right? They're not golden because the person could walk away if they wanted to. But like you said, they would either have to give it all back or owe the doctor. So yeah, it's another way that you can do it. And again, like most insurances, it's a piece of the puzzle. Right. I'll tell you right now, I get very weary. Anyone tells me that I should always do something or I should never do something because I live in the gray. So for certain people, it may make a ton of sense. For other people, it may not make any sense. And that's where, that's just where it comes in of getting to know you, getting to know the practice, getting to know the cash flow, getting to know, what is it you're trying to do and how far along in the process are you right now?
Help me understand. I was talking to a friend not too long ago and he basically said that he used the cash value of his whole life policy. I don't understand this, so I need you to educate me.
Okay.
Excuse me. He used the cash value of a whole life policy to purchase real estate on the beach. That is now like his getaway place to go. And he said he paid cash for it. And they're going to Airbnb it and all this kind of stuff. And there's some way he explained to me how the interest, like you can basically take a loan from yourself from your whole life policy. And the interest is tax deductible, or how does that work?
So there's let me start off by saying I'm going to blow it up on a scale a little bit larger for anyone who may be listening, aside from your friend at the beach, although I'm sure he's a nice guy. There's a very popular place down in Orlando. There's a large mouse that lives there and runs around. And I know I've had to take my kid there 5 or 6 times already since he's been born. Okay. That was purchased with cash value from whole life insurance because Walt, let's call him Walt, didn't want people to know what he was doing. And the bank wouldn't give him a loan for such a crazy idea. So he would go out, get investor money and buy whole life with it to secure the investment, and then use the cash value from the whole life to create different LLCs to buy the plots of land. And that's how he assembled that large of a piece of land without anyone knowing what was going on.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So look it up. It's kind of a cool story.
I did know that he went to like 400 banks And
yeah.
some abnormally high number of banks he went to, they all turned him down.
Yeah. The other big one that everyone likes to talk about is John Harbaugh, or it could be Jim. I always forget. I always get him confused. The coach at Michigan, football coach at Michigan. He's making about $9 million a year in salary, and he puts 5.5 of it directly into a whole life policy. Right? He doesn't even take it. Yeah.
Can you put that much in a whole life policy?
Yeah, as long as you can prove the income. I mean, think about it. You just earlier on, you asked how many times my income do I need in insurance?
Yeah.
You said 8. So if he's making 8 or 9, 10 a year, yeah. Yep. So he's just sticking in a whole life policy. So University of Michigan pays it directly in. But anyways, getting back to your question. And the more common technique that people do this for is retirement spending. Right. So you've got a whole life policy. It's got a ton of cash in it. And when we do these for our doctor clients, we use a handful of companies. There are 4 or 5 companies out there that we use to do these policies with, because what happens is, let's just making up numbers. Say you've got $100,000 of cash value inside one of your policies, and you want to take out 30 to go put a down payment down on a place at the beach. And your friend will be the exact same way. The numbers are just bigger. Mm-hmm. When the company looks at that policy at the end of the year, they're going to say, hey, John, you've got $100,000. Here's your 6% dividend. So they're going to give you another $6,000 because you had 100 in there. But then they're going to say, well, you took a loan of 30 and we're going to charge you, say, 5% interest on that 30 that you borrowed. So net at the end of the day, you're still making a full 6% on $70,000. And because of the interest rate spread, you're still making 1% on the 30, even though you've borrowed it and pulled it out.
How do taxes apply right there?
It's not taxed because it's your money and you're taking a loan from yourself.
Right.
So the way that, when these policies come into play, the benefit that we see to them is that if they're built the right way and if they're funded the right way, when you get to retirement, most doctors have, they've got a 401k, they've got a simple or a SEP or something like that they funded through their office. And when they take that money out, it's going to be taxable in the future, right? If they've started a Roth or if they have an overfunded whole life policy, the government can't touch that money. So, one of the things that we talk about again, when we're getting to know you is, what is it that you want when you retire and how much of your bucket do you want taxed when you retire? And the irony is most people are like, I don't want any of it taxed. But then when we talk to them about how they're saving for retirement, it's all in traditional IRAs or traditional 401ks. Right. And that happens way more often than not. So what that does is it allows us a conversation part to open up one of those conversations and say, would this make sense for you? Yes or no? And most of the time they've had a bad experience with someone in the past. They don't want to talk about it. It's a 4-letter word. So we try to educate a little bit. And if they still don't like it, that's fine. There are many more tools in the toolbox that we can use.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, what's the demographic, would you say, of the biggest portion of your clients?
Man, I'm across the dental spectrum. We've got dental students who, right now they're gotten a small disability policy and they're putting $50 into a Roth IRA every month. And we've got the doctor who just sold his multi-unit practice for a couple $1 million and he's ready to turn that asset base into income. We're all the way across the board.
Let's say I sold a practice. Let's say I sold my practice for $1 million, right? Because capital gains is the big issue that people are going to run into this year because it's going to play out. And so let's say that I sold my practice for $1 million. The bank gives me a check for $1 million. Can I put that $1 million into like a whole life or something like that? Am I still going to pay the capital gains no matter what? Is there a way that I can get?
Yeah, no, you'd still have to pay it because you're selling one asset to and funding a different kind. Within that $1 million, there are a lot of working parts that we'd have to sit down and talk to your accountant about how much of it's goodwill, how much of it's tangible assets. So there's a lot in there, but no, once you get that check for $1 million, you're free to go do whatever it is you want with it.
Interesting. And that's something that we talked to a lot of our guys about, because obviously capital gains is a problem. And I imagine this is going to become more popular this year than it has in recent years. But financial arrangements like could even be owner financing to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
That, towards the end of the year, I closed several deals with several clients where we had the banks were basically requiring that the owner carried part of the note. Yeah. Where they were doing 100% financing in 2019 and 2020, they were doing like 80.
Yeah. Yeah.
And carry part of the note.
One of the things that we look at, and again, for some people it works, for some people it doesn't. But one of the things that we like to consider is, at least, depending on who you're selling it to, instead of getting that $1 million check this year and incurring the full brunt of it, it might be better to stretch that out over, say, 5 years, right? Where you're going to get a $200,000 check for 5 years, and maybe the buying doctor pays a little bit of interest as well because of the financial arrangement. But the nice thing is, when you sell these practices, from what we're seeing, is unless you sell to a private equity firm or a DSO who's just going to come in and cut a check and that's all they want, you've got some flexibility, and the only thing that limits you really is your creativity and your ability to find out what makes sense.
So I see there are earn-out arrangements that I see a lot of that are a good way to kind of get around capital gains. There are obviously owner financing is an option. Well, there's some flexibility there if both parties are flexible.
And so here's an even crazier one, just to kind of bring the conversation full circle. That Section 162 bonus plan that I had mentioned before, where the older doctor, gives the younger doctor money, the younger doctor sticks it in a higher cash value life insurance policy. Well, when all that's said and done, the older doctor knows the young doctor has cash value sitting in this policy over here. They may then be able to lower the price of the practice to reduce some of that capital gains. And then the younger doctor gives the older doctor cash value from the policy. Now, again, there's a lot of different accounting issues that can come into play with that. But it can happen.
Yeah. So you've been working with dentists for how long now?
A little over a decade now. 12, 13 years. Mm-hmm.
Would you say that you like working on the dental side, working with dentists more? Or did you like the other side better?
The other guys.
Don't say the dentist side. Dentists are watching this.
No, the fringe benefits from working with the other guys were definitely a lot cooler. They were much more fun to show off to my friends for. But no, it's what I find with the dental group. You can kind of put them in a couple of different buckets, right? There are some who realize their best use of time and the most profitable use of their time is seeing patients in the chair. Mm-hmm. And that's, those are the people that we really like to work with, because we can take a look at their numbers. We can help them identify, some potential areas of improvement. We can look at all their back office and their investments and their retirement, and just help them make sure that everything that they're doing makes sense. And then there are other groups who just feel like they can do everything about everything because they read a book or watched a video. And usually those practices don't integrate as well into our practice. And it's not that we're trying to hide something or pull something over someone's eyes. It's just, we do what we do and we feel like we've become really, really good at it. I would never try to do a frenectomy on myself because I watched a YouTube video on it. Mm. Right. So, we just like to realize that you're good at what you do. I'm good at what I do. And we both work well together when we're both doing what we do best. Mm-hmm. Right. So what I've tried to do is the planning platform that we use. It's very visual. It's very intuitive. It's very easy to digest the numbers. Right. I can come to you and say, hey, John, I put everything in your plan. You told me you want to retire based on these few assumptions that we've made. Hey, John, you've got a 30% chance of getting there. Is that good or bad? Right. And you're probably going to say, oh, it's not great. What do we need to do to get it to 60 or 70% chance or even 100% chance of success? Right. Mm-hmm. That's a very different conversation than if I just came to you and said, hey, John, I need you to put more money in your retirement.
Right.
Right.
Now, This may be something that you're not as familiar with, but I'm curious about the real estate side.
Sure.
Because that's, I mean, with the exception of like 2008.
Yeah.
I mean, even then, Warren Buffett made a great comment. He goes, something that I don't understand. He goes, when clothes go on sale or TVs go on sale, everybody goes out and buys TVs and clothes.
Yep.
When the stock market goes on sale,
people run.
Everybody sells.
Yep.
He's like, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
And one of his best pieces of advice is to find a company that has real tangible value, but is currently undervalued, and buy that.
Yep. Right.
Because when the market rebounds, then the value comes back, like cruise lines. There's real tangible value there. Before COVID, the value was there. COVID came. COVID's not going to last forever. It's going to go away. When it goes away, the value comes right back. Hotels.
Yep.
Right. So there's a lot of examples like that. And so I take a very similar approach when I'm doing like buyer rep coaching and I'm helping doctors find practices to buy. And then you've got the acquisition versus startup debate. I had Dr. Daniel Bird, a good friend of mine, on this podcast. I think it was last night. Was it Monday night? Today's Wednesday, right? Yeah.
Yes.
I had him on Monday night, and he started a bunch of practices from scratch. And so I'm trying to convince him to leverage acquisitions. Yeah. Because startups, there's no cash flow. There are times when it makes more sense to do a startup. His scenario was one of those times because he was doing something very unique. But for the vast majority of people, you're investing a bunch of money in something that has no cash flow initially. Why not find a asset, a dental practice that's undervalued? Yep. Mismanaged hygiene schedule, undiagnosed or presented or uncompleted treatment. Yep. Right. The practice really should have 3 hygienists. They're only running 1. Right. Well, that thing will double or triple, in 6 to 12 to 18 months. And I've got countless examples of that. Yeah. So.
And John, the crazy part is it all goes back to this word that you'll keep hearing me say over and over and over again. It's education. Mm-hmm. Most of these people, they don't even know they just don't know what to look for.
Right.
Right. And so if they look at a practice, most of the time their eyes tend to go 2 places when they see a P&L for the first time. They go to the top line, they go to the bottom line. Mm-hmm. Right. And if they don't understand really what's going on in the middle, why is fine, the top line is what it is, but why is the bottom line what it is? It's really, it can be very challenging for someone who is possibly just getting started or is looking at a practice and they haven't done an acquisition in a long time. Mm-hmm. To be able to see only one hygienist, right? That goes back to the labor percentage that I was talking to you about earlier, mm-hmm. right? You can't find what's your case acceptance rate in a P&L statement,
right?
Right. But what you can find is let's look at a couple different things together and figure out what's going on. How many patients did we see today versus how many treatment plans got accepted, mm-hmm. right? And if that's a 90% plus, hey, you're rocking and rolling. If that's less than 50, we may have to talk about the way they're presenting stuff, right? Or treatment plans, or are they not being clear enough, or do they not take credit, or do, whatever it is. There could be a multitude of factors that come into play. But the acquiring doctor needs to be able to see that through the top line and the bottom line.
Yeah. I want to come back to the real estate part, but you mentioned something earlier and you just touched on it again. And I got asked this question. I was doing a merger acquisition event. I don't know if you know Matt Poppert, Ryan LaPrade, match guy.
Absolutely. DDS match guys. They're great.
Yeah. I was doing a merger and acquisition event with Matt down in Atlanta. And this was like when things were shut down. Right. Mm-hmm. So we had 5 to 7 people there, and we live streamed it, had several people on the live stream, but we did it in conjunction with our training university. Right. So we had a bunch of clients there, and a question came up. There was one lady in the room who her husband's a pediatric dentist, and they've got several ortho and pedo joint practices. Right. And they're in expansion mode. And they had asked a question. They said, when we buy a practice, how do we know when we buy that practice? Obviously, we can look at the P&L, like you just said. I can look at top line, bottom line. I can look at supplies. How do I know if I get a good team? How do I know if that practice has a good team in it? Right. And I made a statement at that moment. I didn't really have time to think it through. It was just like gut level response. And my response is what I believe to be the number one most important number on that P&L is staff salaries, because it tells me so much. The staff, the team rather, excuse my language, has influence over a lot of variables in that practice. There are a couple that they don't. So if I look at a P&L and I see that, industry average staff salary percentage is 28%, we target with our clients between 20 and 25. So if all they're getting is a paycheck, we want to see them around 20, 21, 22. Yeah. If they're getting, 401k match, health insurance, paid time off, then 23, 24, 25 is acceptable. And so if I look at a P&L and I see the P&L and the payroll is 37%, right? That doesn't necessarily tell me that you've got the wrong people in there. It could, but it doesn't necessarily. I want to look at a couple of other things first. The first thing I want to look at is I want to look at the procedure mix. If the doctor's only doing crown and bridge, there's only so much crown and bridge in 1,500 patients. Right. And if his new patient flow is low, new patient volume's low, they're probably not very proactive, or at least not as proactive and disciplined with respect to hygiene reactivation as we encourage and coach a lot of our practices to be. So they're not getting a lot of those patients that haven't been in there in 18 to 24 months in the chair, because they have a higher probability of needing treatment. So you're not going to be converting as much dentistry, right? And so your production per patient visit is going to be lower. And the restorative side is the more profitable side of the practice, right? So if your payroll percentage is high, it's because your productivity is low, right? Not as efficient, with the patients. So if he's only doing crown and bridge, that's a huge, huge variable to address. If they're doing crown and bridge and endo and implants and ortho and third molars and IV sedation and, all this stuff, then there should be more. The bucket of treatment should be more than big enough to keep that doctor scheduled very, very productively. I can check that one off. And then I'd go down to the next one. The next one is fee schedule and insurance reimbursements. If their fees, and I see this all the time, man, it'll be a fee for service practice. And then I'll pull the NDAS and I'll do a fee schedule analysis, and their fees are in the 40th percentile. Their fees are less than what they would be getting from a PPO. And I'm like, why are you doing this? And they're like, well, I'm trying to compete with the PPO practice across the street. Then go in network with the PPO plan and get 20% more, on your fee. Update your fee schedule, right? And then renegotiation of insurance reimbursements. These guys never do that. They should be doing that every 2 to 3 years.
So one of the things that we like to do, and this is literally a 10-minute exercise for anyone who's listening now, please go ahead and do it. We ask them to take their 3 most common procedures, whatever kind of dental practice you're in, whatever kind of office you're in, your 3 most common procedures, and just jot down who's in the room, what supplies do you use, what equipment do you use, and try to come up with a figure. If you've got a hygienist making $40 an hour and it's a 30-minute procedure, $20 for that person. If you use 2 pairs of gloves, that's, it's 10 cents or, whatever it works out to, and just add up. What does it cost? Roughly, what does it cost you to do that procedure? And it's amazing how many people don't have a clue. And when we talk to them about, well, how did you get to that point to begin with, right? How did you know to charge X number of dollars for this procedure? Either what you just said is spot on, right? Well, I'm trying to compete with the guys down the street, or it's, well, I bought the practice from someone and that's what he was charging, so I just kept it there.
Yeah, I was afraid to raise the fees.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I didn't want to upset anyone. You're like, man, you can't do procedures that lose you money. Yeah, that's not the definition of success. And you can't carry in. Here's another one. I totally agree with you. You can't carry insurance plans that cost you money every time that patient sits in a hygiene chair. No, there's a big deal going on with Delta right now. I'm sure you guys are,
Kansas is getting Delta Dental of Kansas getting sued.
Well, there's a bunch of them because Delta as a whole, the legacy people who have been on Delta forever, they're allowing reimbursements at one rate, but for the younger docs who are coming on board, Delta's not giving them that same level. And what's interesting, I'm sure if you haven't seen it yet, you will. We've got a situation right now where the young doctor's buying out an older doctor. the older doctor is still on the top tier Delta. The younger is going to be forced on the lower tier. And it works out to about a $200,000 difference in cash flow over the course of the year.
Yeah.
So the old doctor's valuing his practice up here, and the young doctor saying, well, man, when I take it over, even if I keep up the same level, it's only going to be worth this.
Yeah.
So it's been an interesting,
that's such a good point, man. Such a good point. Cause a lot of guys don't look for that. It's what I tell my guys. Cause I've got a couple of older doctors who are Delta Premier only.
Yeah.
And they're in Premier. They're getting the highest reimbursement.
Right.
And I'm like, guys, you've got to get another insurance plan in here.
Yep.
You have either drop Delta Premier completely and just be done with it and move on, or you're going to have to get another insurance plan in here for two reasons. A, if I try to buy your practice, Delta Premier is not going to accept me. I'm going to get Delta PPO.
Right.
And your practice isn't valued at Delta Premier fees. It's going to be valued to me. Any buyer that tries to buy your practice, it's not just one or two people. It is everybody that's going to try to buy your practice cannot get on Delta Premier. You're not going to have another 65-year-old dentist try to buy your practice. It's not very likely. Not saying it doesn't happen. I've got an old guy, a much older gentleman in Chattanooga who it was a retired orthodontist, built a general DSO, about 8-9 locations, sold it all, rode off into the sunset, and then decided he was bored. He rode back. Now he's looking for general practices to buy. So not very likely that's going to happen. But, unless they're already in network with Delta Premier, they're not going to get credentialed with Delta Premier. It's very, very rare. I have seen it. I have seen a younger doctor get credentialed with Delta Premier. It's very, very rare. So you can't count on that. So rather than have all your eggs, you being a financial planner, you don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? You have multiple baskets.
That's right.
And you diversify your liability a little bit, okay, or your risk rather a little bit. Same thing is true there. If 85% of your patient base is Delta Premier, that's a lot of risk. Yeah. That's a lot of risk. You need to get like a Humana or another, good insurance plan in there. Every state's different, and build that part of your practice so that you're not so dependent upon Delta. That's one reason. The other reason is what's to keep Delta to come back. I mean, apparently they're not scared of lawsuits. No. What's to keep them to send a letter out to all the Premier guys and say, guys, as of January 1st, 2022, your rate's going to $800 on a crown.
Yep.
Right. They could do it like that. They're not, they got a big enough money. They can hold this thing in litigation for however long they want to. So they got to be careful with that. That's a dangerous place to be.
Yep.
That's a great point. So so insurance reimbursements and fee schedule would be the second thing that I would look at. If that checks out, like if they just raise their fees to the 80th percentile, just renegotiate their insurance reimbursements, then I can check that one off. And then I'm going to go to the next one. And then the next one is the one that the team really has the most influence over, right? And that's the way they schedule. It is, how do they engineer the schedule? If you've got a doctor he will only work with one assistant and work out of one room, right? His productivity is going to be very limited. That could be one of the reasons why the payroll percentage is higher than it should be.
Sure.
But if he's working with two auxiliary assistants and he's got his overflow room and his team understands how to schedule, and they're doing treatment reactivation, hygiene reactivation, and they know when to pull treatment forward, and they know how to manage time. Don't give him 2 hours if he only needs 90 minutes. Right. But they know what his time allocations are, and they can effectively engineer that schedule. If all three of those boxes are checked, there is no way his payroll percentage is 37%. Absolutely no way. So that's the very first three. That's the first three places I would look at. If I check all three of those boxes and he's still at 37%, there's a culture problem. It could be poor leadership. It could be poor communication. You may have some toxic people in there, but you're not getting 100% out of your people. And that's why your payroll percentage is inflated, which is a little bit bigger challenge, but it's something that needs to be addressed at some point.
Sure.
Okay. Circling back to the real estate part, because I'm really interested in this. I'm invested in real estate myself. I'm looking at investing in more. I've got a buddy of mine who I got a couple of buddies of mine that flip houses, right? So they'll buy property and they'll put some money into it and they'll flip it, sell it for more. I got another buddy that buys mortgages, which was a really, really interesting concept. And he was trying to teach me how the interest rate's different and how you buy the mortgage and now they're making mortgage payments to you at this interest rate. And this is what you're getting, all this kind of stuff. So I want to learn more about that. But with where the market is right now, I don't know that I would want to buy a house right now.
No,
I don't know if I don't see how there's a lot of money to be made even on flips right now. Cause everything is just so high. Yeah. I don't know if it's tangible value.
No, I here's in my again, my personal opinion. I wanted to bring my crystal ball out tonight, John, but it broke the other day. It's in the shop still. I think this pandemic has just made everybody go stir crazy. So people are getting out of the bigger cities. Mm-hmm. They're fleeing to the suburbs. They're buying the lake house. They're buying the beach house. They're buying all this stuff. The stock market is high and frothy. So when they're checking their retirement accounts, they're going, all right, we've got the money to do this. Not a problem. What I see happening is whenever we get back to life as normal, or at least what the new normal will be, and things like kids sports open back up. And all of a sudden that lake house that you were going to every weekend, you don't see it for 6 months, but you still have to pay the mortgage and the power bill and the cable and the Wi-Fi and all that stuff. I think there's going to be a glut of people who go, man, it's just not worth it. And they get rid of it. Yep. So, it will have served the purpose of getting them through this tough time. But I don't see how these values stay that high. Yeah,
I don't, because I actually benefited tremendously because my home appreciated in value like $100,000.
Yeah.
During the course of this thing, it's worth $100,000 more than it was when I bought it. And I bought this house 4 years ago. And I was like, well, that's great.
Yeah. Right.
That's wonderful news. But I don't see how it stays there because the whole reason the value of real estate went up, supply and demand.
Yep.
Right. People weren't selling their homes. People are moving here.
Yeah.
Right. Contractors stopped building because there was a supply shortage on lumber. You saw the price of lumber. I mean, it doubled, tripled. Right. So they stopped building. People stopped building houses. You've got more people moving to the Southeast. Right. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot more people wanting to buy houses than there are houses. So price goes way up.
Right.
But that's going to stop at some point. Does the value stay there or does it come back down to real life? Because I wouldn't want to buy another property here and then 12 months from now, the exact opposite happens.
Right. So here again, just my personal opinion. I think that the second house market will come back to life. Will come back down some. The beach house, the lake house, all that. I do think though that the smaller cities, right? Birmingham's a great example. We're 100 miles due west of Atlanta. We're 120 miles from Chattanooga. We're about 3 hours from Nashville. A place like Birmingham where you could get to any of those major cities quickly. Now that we're working in this Zoom economy, I think those houses are going to stay. I think they're going to stay up because people want space. People learn they don't want to live in the 2-bedroom condo high rise, and be stuck inside for 6 months.
Right.
So they want the yard. They want the space where they can go stretch out. And generally speaking, you're not going to find that in downtown Atlanta. You're not going to find that in downtown Los Angeles. So it's going to be easier for them to move to these smaller cities. And I do think that's going to keep the house prices high there for a while.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah. I'm really eager to see what happens there because I'm debating. Right. Like I'm looking at properties right now and I'm like, do I pull the trigger on it? Do I wait?
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on what kind of property it is. I think it definitely, the local market and what's going on there. And then what's around it. Right. Mm-hmm. You don't want to own the nicest house in the worst neighborhood.
Right. So where are you headed next? What's the next 5-10 years look like for you? Continue to build. And I'm sorry, I should have backed up.
Yeah, no, you're fine.
Your firm, did you start that firm? Do you have other?
No, I've joined my firm. I joined them for a couple of different reasons. The first one, like I said before, we are an independent group. So, when we talk, most people ask me before our first conversation, what are we going to talk about? And the honest answer is, I don't know. My first 1 to 2 meetings with most clients, I'm just getting to know you. We're just, like I said, we're talking about your goals and where you want to go and what are you doing so far. But my firm doesn't make any proprietary products. We don't have any proprietary products. So it allows us to be, again, completely independent when we're working with our clients. That's why when we talk about the whole life, I know some people get excited, some people don't like it. It doesn't matter to me either way, because that's not how I'm going to get paid. It allows us to maintain fiduciary relationships. We didn't really touch on this, but I am a CFP, which in our world is kind of like being board certified in the dental world. And that allows me to put your best interests ahead of mine at all times, no questions asked. And so when I was trying to figure out where I wanted to go with my business and what I wanted it to look like, did I start my own thing? Do I join a group of people who already had it? This company recruited me for about 4 years. They've got a great tech stack, independence, fiduciary, just made all the sense in the world. So I joined them. I'm in process right now of hiring a couple more people onto my team, which I'm very excited about. But candidly, I need them to be at the same level that I am. I want them to have the same licenses that I do. I want them to have a lot of the same understandings of the products and how they're best used and when you talk about what with who. And so I'm just trying to get my team a little bit bigger. Like I said, want to add a few more over the next couple of years. And just keep rocking and rolling. We've done some good things with some of our dentists in California. I'd do anything to go visit them right now, because just to get out of the house. My ones in New York and Ohio right now, I'm happy just Zooming with. And the ones in Florida, I'm actually going to see a couple in a few days. So, we're just trying to get out there and do what we do. Try to be an open and unbiased ear for these dentists who don't know. And that's what we find. My wife was in this situation. I don't know if you've ever seen that Simon Sinek clip about start with why.
Yeah.
So Jen and I, we've really taken that to heart. It hit me harder than probably any of those motivational speeches that I've ever heard. But I really liked it. And it hit close to home with me. So, when my wife inherited her father's practice at the ripe old age of early 20s, because she'd kill me if I say it, and she didn't know a thing about business. All I keep thinking about is, who would I want to have been in front of her if I wasn't around? And what would I have wanted them to say? So, like I said, the education point is it's so big with us, because if we can educate you on the way different things work and why they may or may not be right for your practice, it does a couple things for everybody. First of all, hopefully it puts the doctors and their team in a good place. And that's valuable in and of itself. But second, I'm the only Todd Doobrow in the world. There's literally not another one. So if I mess up, it's going to drag my name through the mud. I can't blame it on the other Todd Doobrow who lives somewhere else. So, my name and my reputation mean the world to me. They're invaluable. And when people speak my name, I want them to say, "Oh yeah, I worked with him. He's awesome." And so, yes, our sales cycle might take a little bit longer. It may take us, a couple of extra weeks to get you to the point where we're ready to take some action. But, our clients so far seem to be completely okay with that, and they don't leave. It's a relationship, just like we talked about, whether you're training for a competition or I'm running one of my races. It's not a one-time event and then you're done, right? When I'm planning for this race that may only be 3 miles, I'm going to train 2-3 months for it. If you're going to a show, it probably takes you 6 to 8 months before you get there. And that's a one-time event. You're going to be in retirement for 40 years, right? Like, it's going to take a few minutes to get to know you and really figure out where it is you want to be. My favorite statistic that the CFP board put out last year was the average American spends more time watching one of their favorite college or pro teams play a game in one weekend than they do all year on retirement planning.
Oh,
right. So that's, that's where we want to do is we want to make it so the conversation, it's not a difficult one to understand. I don't use a lot of industry jargon. I try to talk to people like like I said, like my wife would, like I'd want someone to talk to my wife. And then, like I said, we put it out in a graphic manner so you can see, hey, if this is what you keep doing, there's a good chance you're going to be in this range of outcomes. Is that what you want or not? If it is, that's fine. If it's not, let's talk about what we need to do to change it.
Mm-hmm. Very good. How's your wife's practice doing?
Like everyone else, man, March and April of last year were tough. Luckily she had a pretty good bounce back the rest of the year. My heart goes out to every dentist out there because, I feel like every time I talk to someone, they look more like spacemen than dentists, between the masks and the face shields and all the PPE that you guys are wearing. So, my heart does go out to you. Keep doing what you're doing. And, she's doing okay. She's doing all right.
Yeah, I'm curious, and like my crystal ball is non-existent, but I do pay attention to a lot of the trends because I'm a numbers guy, right? I'm an analytical. Like I like numbers, I like trends, I like statistics. And I don't know. She's a periodontist, right?
Yes.
See, I don't know if I had this conversation with Daniel. I don't know if in 10 years, I don't know that there will be that many specialty practices.
Well, are you talking about the rise of the super GP?
Well, that's one of them. That's one factor. The other factor is, I think it makes more sense. I mean, if I'm an oral surgeon, right? I've got a brick and mortar $1 million facility, brick and mortar. I got a team of 9 people. Mm-hmm. I've got to cut checks. I've got to manage them. I've got to hold team meetings. I have a lot of business ownership responsibility on top of the clinical responsibility. What if, let's say I take home $750, right? What if rather than paying a mortgage of $8,500 a month, and having all of this responsibility, what if I just worked as an independent contractor in 16 different practices, 16 days in a month?
Yep. I
have no responsibility. I show up, I see patients, I do dentistry. Maybe I have an assistant that I bring with me, or maybe they provide my assistant. Right. And I get my check and I go home.
Yeah. The only, first of all, who knows, right? I mean, no one knows what's going to happen, but the only polite pushback I would give is that's a conversation that you need to bring your accountant in on. Because when you go 1099 independent contractor in a dental world, the IRS has come up with some pretty stringent stipulations on if someone else sets your schedule, if someone else dictates how you dress, if someone else, provides you with your supplies, then you're not really an independent contractor, right? You may only be part-time, but you're not truly an IC. So,
right.
Right now there's just so many things up in the air that can change. I think right now everyone's, aside from a couple groups that are acquiring and some of our old docs who are selling and trying to get out, I think everyone's just trying to batten down the hatches and just keep the lights on and just try to get through this. That's where most people's mind seems to be.
I struggle with that one too, man, because we had a lot of practices that grew a lot last year.
Well, I will say most of my doctor clients are from a cash position, from an asset, are significantly better off than they were at the start of 2020. But the other thing that was nice, I try to find the light in any dark situation. And one of the things that I've been talking about a lot lately is because of this pandemic, it caused us to hit the pause button, which it sounds like you and I are very similar. I don't sit still very long. I like to go. But what it did make us do was really reprioritize things that are important in our life. And a lot of us thought that the practice was the number one most important thing because that's what eats up 10, 12 hours of your day. But this pandemic really caused a lot of people to go, you know what? No, it was nice to be able to sit at home with my spouse and my child for a couple extra hours. And, I've had doctors say, I'm okay. And I don't need to make $750. You know what? I'm all right making $6. If that means if I'm out of the office at 4:30 or 5 every day, so not everything that we've seen is necessarily an improvement. It's just people have rearranged some things that I don't think they would have had this pandemic not come through.
Yeah, I totally agree. I do think that the I do think that the market is because if you want to know where dentistry's headed, look at medical.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, because if you think medical, that's a $450 billion industry. The dentistry's 50.
Yeah.
Right. So everything's going to start medical first. That's where all the private equity money is going to go first. If I'm an entrepreneur and I've got a great idea, I want to build a widget, and then I go to the private equity and I say, hey, I'm going to build widgets and this is what it's going to do. I'm going to go after dentists. They're going to say, no, you're not. You're going to go after medical. We're going to start there. And then once we've gotten whatever market share we can get there, then we'll go to dentists. Right. Yeah. So everything kind of starts there. And so I think with the super GP, I definitely think that is influencing that trend. I think there's going to be more group practices.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be more group practices. And I think that, 10, 15 years from now, if you're a dentist, you're either going to be an owner dentist or you're going to be employed by a dentist. But I think I just see it trending in that direction. That doesn't mean that there's not going to be standalone, businesses, right? I just think that environment's becoming a little bit more difficult. And I do think that a lot of guys are starting to see, like, let's say both you and I are dentists and we work across the street from one another. I have a CERAC and a Celea and a CT and a 3D printer and a staff,
right,
and a building, and so do you.
Right.
Why are you and I covering the same costs twice?
Right. Yeah.
Why don't you and I go into business together, have one facility, one staff, one CT, CERAC, Celea, 3D printer?
Yep.
Both of us work fewer hours and take home more money.
And again, it all goes back, again, not to sound like a broken record, but it all goes back to that education part, right? Most people are taught when they get out of school, here's what you're going to do, and I will say kind of what's interesting from a career path standpoint. I see a lot of the younger new dentists who are starting out, they're going to work for DSOs for 2 or 3 years, and then they're breaking off and, starting their own independent practice.
Mm-hmm. And
then, kind of looking 20, 30 years down the road, I see them selling back to the DSO.
Yeah.
So I do think there's going to be, there'll always be that independent practice group. But I think the life cycle is going to look a little bit different. And what I'm trying to do is help make sure that they don't have to sell out to anyone unless that's what they want to do, not what they have to do.
Right.
Right. There's a very big difference. The last few older doctors that we've started working with, they brought us on late to the game. We did for them what we could, but there's no way that they're going to save as much over a short period of time to cover the expenses of the next 40 years.
Right.
And when that DSO came in, checkbook in hand, they weren't going to take the time to go try to find someone who just graduated from, the local dental school to see if they could line up financing and take it over. They just took the check.
Yeah.
And it is what it is. I don't mean that, in a good light or a bad light. It's just, that's what's happening now is that they're getting to the end. They're working longer than they thought they were going to. And, they'll call us on, and you've probably gotten this call, they'll call us on Wednesday and say, hey, I'm ready to retire. And you say, when? And they're like, I don't know, Friday, find me a buyer. And you're going, it takes a little bit longer than that. Yeah. But they get put in that situation because that's the situation that they draw up for themselves.
Yeah. What's your recommendation on the, I realize you're not an accountant, but you've got some thoughts here, I'm sure. Independent contractor versus employee, if I'm an associate.
Again, completely depends on the practice. Most accountants that I work with say, if you're just going to be in one practice, you're not really an independent contractor. Mm. And the question is, how far are you willing to push it, before you raise some flags, and we've seen, I've only seen very, very few people actually get audited. But it's a matter of what you're comfortable with and what the owner doctor is comfortable with as well.
Right. Which one is most beneficial in your opinion?
I think if it's a younger,
let's say you check the box of an independent contractor versus now you fall under the employee category. Which one is more financially beneficial to me as an associate?
And again, it depends on what it is you're trying to do. Are you trying to buy the practice out? Are you eventually going for some ownership? Are you disciplined enough to do all the stuff that the doctor would, is going to do for you? Most independent contractors don't know that you still have to pay Social Security tax, right? So are you well trained enough to take every penny that comes in and put 30% of it aside?
Mm-hmm.
right? To help pay for your taxes. Are you disciplined enough to go open up your own retirement plan and fund it every 2 weeks or whenever it is you get paid?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Are you, if you're trying to buy in to a practice, I've always been told, and from what I've seen, it's better to be a W-2 associate, because when you go to the bank to probably get the loan to buy the retiring doctor out, you can say, well, part of this is me, and here are my hours, and here's my production, and here's everything I've done. I've been a part of the process. So they view that as you integrating into the practice better. And then if you're an associate as well, from what I've seen, it's a little stickier. The relationship's a little more formal. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing. But if you're working somewhere, it's not just going to be, well, fine, get out of my office because I don't owe you anything anyways, right? Whenever there are issues that arise with W-2s, they tend to take a little longer to resolve themselves, and cooler heads usually prevail instead of it just being a get out of my office. You're not even really an employee here anyways.
Yeah. The obstacle that I see with the employee conversation is you don't get like business deductions.
Right. No, you don't.
If I want to go to Spear,
right.
I want to go through an advanced postgraduate clinical curriculum.
Right.
I can't write that off.
No, but if you negotiate, here's the thing: is you got to have the foresight to negotiate in a continuing ed line item or budget. Tell the doctor you want $10,000 for CE. Tell them you can negotiate anything. That's the fun part of it. People it's just people don't know. They get most of the time they get presented with a contract. The only thing they really argue over is the pay or the collection percentage. That's it. I mean, it's a contract. It's a negotiation. You can work in whatever it is you want. And candidly, that may work out a little bit better for some people by being a W-2, by letting the company, absorb those extra costs, and then have the guy say, if you want $10,000 to do, continuing ed, go for it. Knock yourself out. Here's a check.
Yeah.
Why
would the IRS be so adamant on the associate dentist being an employee versus an independent contractor if they're getting paid either way? They're either getting paid, the associate's going to pay his taxes, or the owner's going to pay taxes on the associate's behalf.
Right. I think, like you said, it comes down to the deduction part. When you're a straight 1099, there's a whole lot of stuff you get to write off. And so I think they're trying to, limit that. I'm not an accountant. I just know that's been brought up multiple times. When you're an IC, usually you get paid a little bit more because they know that tax part has to come out. So that's a line item on the practice books, right? So now they're not getting the corporate tax or possibly the pass-through tax to the doctor. And then you're writing that off as well. So everyone wins more when you can actually get a true IC in the books, which is probably why the IRS doesn't want you to do it.
Right. I tell you what hurts my feelings, man, is I see so many like disgruntled dentists.
Yeah.
Like, especially if you get into some of these Facebook groups,
right?
You'll see a lot of people that are just very, very just miserable or unsatisfied, or they're, that they would tell anybody, don't go to dental school, don't pick dentistry as a profession, do something else. And I really struggle with that because I understand that maybe they're, I don't know, maybe they're just disappointed. They thought their career had more. They thought they were capable of more. But I mean, where else can you, and I understand student loans high. I think New York, NYU, I think is the first dental school to break $700,000 in tuition.
Yeah, it's insane.
So I understand it's expensive, but if you're effective, if you have the leadership skills, if you've got the business acumen, or you find somebody that can help you develop the business acumen, leadership skills, and you build a six-figure practice, $1, $2, $3 million, you're taking home $700,000-$800,000 a year. Working 4 days a week, man, it's hard to find that anywhere else. Plus you put yourself in a position where, you own the business, right? You own the practice. There's equity that's on your balance sheet. You own the real estate, right? Plus you could potentially be the bank when you decide to transition. So those three strategies have created more millionaires in this country than any other strategy.
Yeah, but
and the
John,
the dentist is sitting in the driver's seat of those three things.
The biggest obstacle to that though, and you kind of touched on it, on social media groups, on Facebook groups, this is a now generation. They don't want to wait. They want things right now.
Right.
So yes, I understand that dental school, it is expensive. And the way that I always try to frame it to people, it's you go into a really cool nightclub that's got one heck of a cover charge. But once you're in, it's an open bar and you get to drink the finest of drinks and eat the finest of foods.
Mm-hmm.
Your buddies who don't go to dental school, who just, they graduate with their undergrad and they go take a job at the bank, are going to make $50,000 and they'll get their 2% raises every year.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you're going to take on debt and yes, it's going to stink. And yes, it's going to be painful, but you're going to triple their starting salary coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually those loans are going to be paid off and
Mm-hmm.
you're still going to be making, $250 if you're slightly good at what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you own your practice that you can sell and you own the real estate and, so and then, it only gets compounded when you look at the stock market, right? Look at things like GameStop and, this stock's up 500%. This is up 800%. This is up 900%. People just don't want to wait for anything anymore. They don't want to build. They don't want to slow build. They want it. They want it now. And if you can't get it to me now, it's not worth it. And I'm not going to do it.
Right.
Right. But you're absolutely right, man. We have this conversation multiple times a day. And my wife is one of the few female periodontists, who is involved in organized dentistry. And she gets people calling her all the time saying, should I do it? Is it worth it?
Mm-hmm.
And we have to explain to her, if you can look at it from a long-term perspective, it's one of the best things you'll ever do.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to work 9 to 5. No one's work 4 days a week, 3 days a week.
Yeah. Take
2 weeks off of the holiday, do whatever it is you want to do.
Yeah. Same as my business, man. When I started buying franchises from Fortune.
Yeah.
Now I'm trying to diversify myself now. Right. So I'm buying real estate and I've got this gym thing and trying to get into some other stuff. But, when I first started buying franchises from Fortune, I did that with the understanding that, look, it may be 40 years.
Yeah.
Like I could sell any of my franchises now and come out very positive, right? Because they're worth much more now than when they were when I bought my first one 8 years ago.
Right.
I bought the next one 3 years ago, 4 years ago. They're worth much more than they were. And so it's a long-term game, man. I mean, business development, you can have some good, like a good year, solid year, good growth, or certain, spikes in the economy and all that kind of stuff. And you can have fluctuations.
Sure.
But I mean, ultimately, man, that's a long-term game. I totally agree with you. It's you can't look at it like what's it going to do for me, in 6 months. It's what's it going to do for me in 10 or 12 years? Where am I going to be then? And I think too many people focus on the instantaneous gratification, right? And they give up because being in the business ownership chair, man, your ability to develop wealth is so much greater.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Than it is working for a DSO or, working for a private practice, independent, or as an employee. Yeah. So I don't know. I wish more guys saw that, man. Because if I was a dentist, the top 3 wealth development strategies in this country are investing in your own business or another operating company, investing in real estate, and financing deals. And so you've got your practice, you've got the real estate, you own that. Invest money in the business and grow it. Bring on an associate, and then sell the practice to them, 20% at a time.
Yeah.
Over the next 20 years, right? And then each 20% that he buys, he has helped inflate the price.
Yeah.
Right.
The next 20.
Yeah. For the next 20. And then once you've sold your practice to him, lease the real estate to him for 3 years, and then sell the real estate to him.
Yep.
So
the other one of the other hurdles that we're facing, and I'm seeing it more and more often now, is someone they're debating, do they even apply to dental school?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And eventually the conversation comes up and it goes something like this, right? Well, my dad is getting ready to retire and he's making $300,000 a year And I've been told when I come out of school, I'm only going to make $120,000 a year. And I'm like, yeah, that's about right. Your dad's been working for 45 years and he's about to get a raise because you're finally off the payroll.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, but my dad drives this kind of car and my dad lives in this house and my parents do this. And I'm like, yes, but they've been working for 40 years, so you've got to have a realistic expectation of what's going to happen when you come out. Because if you can get most of them past that, they see the growth trajectory, right?
Yeah.
They know what life can look like if they do all this stuff. But a lot of them are going, I'm not going to spend $500,000 to make 120 a year. I'm like, well, that's only your first year. 2-3 years out, you're going to be doing fine. But like we said, it's such a myopic world that we're living in right now. It's what can you do for me now, and how long is it going to take?
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, I don't want to keep you all night. I know you got Spartan races to train for.
I got a Peloton over there that it's calling my name too. I gotta do something.
Oh yeah, man. I gotta go do stairs. I hate training and stopping, doing something else, and then going back and just doing 20 minutes of cardio, man. But as I go into prep and all that kind of stuff, my cardio is going to start picking up, and it's going to be rather than 20 minutes, it's going to be 30, then 40. Then I'm doing 2 hours a day, and it's going to be like,
like we're talking about. It's amazing how small changes can have these huge impacts as time goes on.
Yeah, totally right. Well, man, I appreciate you spending some time with me this evening.
Absolutely.
And, hope you have a great rest of your evening, and I'll talk to you
soon. Go enjoy that cardio.
I will do.
All right, man. I'll talk to you later.
See ya.
Bye, Todd.